Players are getting tired in Wijk aan Zee. In round 11 there were lots of blunders and oversights. Let's start with the game at the top. Magnus Carlsen leading the tournament against Hu Yifan. Now, the Chinese player has defended very, very solidly with black, and, well, she's getting close to holding the draw. Magnus tried, after this check here, Queen f6, Queen c3, offering an exchange of queens. Now, if the queen retreats, then the queen comes to h8, and, well, white has a persistent initiative, nothing clear, but, of course, exchanging queens clarifies the situation. And, you know, when you're tired, it's tempting to simplify and to get closer to that draw. And here very quickly, well, just after a couple of seconds thought, Yifan played h5 and king b4, and suddenly the number one women's player was in massive trouble. That king is coming in. So let's see how the game concluded. King a5. King c7 blocks out white's king for the time being, but after h4, black is in Zugzwang and the king has to retreat. And now Carlsen's task is very, very simple. You're just going to push with b5 to break open the position. Black can do absolutely nothing here. So the game went, king c7, and now again another tempo move, c3, and in this position Yifan resigned. If, for example, king d7, then the king comes in again, and c6. It's a very simple clearance operation. You exchange and then take on d5. Let's go back. Clearly black needs to prevent the king from coming into b4, so a5. Now, there's still a few more things to consider here. It's not, it doesn't close the position completely. Let's take a look. So, because, well, white can play b4. Now, if this is taken, then actually white will win in a very similar way and eventually be able to come in here. But here's the trick. Black does not need to exchange on b4, but instead waits. So king e6. So white takes on b5, and then the king comes back to d7. Now, let's throw in h4 and h5. Okay, so black has no more tempo moves. This position is mutual Zugzwang. If it's black to play, white would win. With white to play, it's only a draw, and it's white to play. So, for example, if the king steps up to d4, then black's king blocks it out. Let's just go back. And if white breaks with a6, you take king b4, king a5, and king b7, and again the white king is blocked out. So let's go back again. But if it were black's move, then white would win. So let's see if white can arrange this. So okay, let's step back with king b2. Black waits, and white steps up. Bit of triangulation going on here. Now, if black's king were to step to d7, then white wins. So triangulation, and suddenly it's the same position, but with black's move. So, for example, if the king steps up here, then you play a6, and white gets there first. Etc. You take. Let's go back. And in this position instead, if king c7, then king d4, and the king steps into e5 and wins. Okay, so what does black play in this position? Remember, white has just shuffled back with king b2 and up to b3. Well, there's one move that still draws, and that's king to d8. So it's the corresponding square. So in this position, if the king steps back to c3, then king d7 is fine again, or if the king steps up to b4, then king c7, and that's a draw. So that was the way to do it. Not completely simple, but still, I think it's again a case where Carlsen shows that he still has energy right into after 4 hours of play. Ifan crumbled, but we've seen it so many times with Magnus's games. Okay, what happened with the player chasing Magnus, Fabiano Caruana? He had black against Mamedyarov. Well, he started off extremely well, but by this stage Mamedyarov has fought back and he has this passed pawn on the queen side. Now black is very active. Caruana went in with his rook and started to munch some pawns on the king side, but Caruana got a shock very soon, so that b pawn advancing, and now probably the simplest is to play bishop c5, sacrifice the bishop for the pawn and then take one more pawn. Well, it's still probably going to be a draw, but Caruana played rook g1 and suddenly he got a bit of a shock, because in this position Mamedyarov sacrificed the exchange and pushed the b pawn. That's clear Caruana overlooked this. He spent 20 minutes working out the complexities of this position and found rook g5. I should say, of course, if the rook checks, then that knight can hop back and block. So rook g5, so threatening, put the rook here, so king b4. Now if rook d5, trying to bring the rook back, this one is not so simple, because white is going to win that rook. Rook steps aside, and then, well, at some point white is going to play b8. Now black should probably draw this, but it's still a bit tricky. Instead Caruana played rook g1, so ready to come behind the pawn. Now knight d2, preventing rook b1. Caruana had worked all this out. Basically, white gets a queen, and now we've ended up in a queen against rook endgame. But this rook is going to sit on d5, and that prevents white's king from getting through to e7, for example. So the rook just sits on d5, and black has a fortress here. I mean, white can try and get a kind of Zugzwang, but, well, Mamedyarov didn't bother. He didn't want to waste time. He was confident Caruana would be able to draw this, and he just repeated the position, so that was a draw. So Caruana couldn't gain ground on Carlsen, or keep pace with him anyway. But there were some amazing games. I mean, but something today in round 11, extraordinary blunders. And missed opportunities as well. Have a look at the game between Michael Adams and Anish Giri. Adams, of course, at the foot of the tournament table. With white, he sacrificed the exchange. He's got a blistering attack here. Here he played bishop e3, and, well, after a rambling game, finally ended in a draw. But he missed a great opportunity. He could have played rook d1, so giving up the knight on c5, white now a whole rook down. You give a check on d8, and now here's a nice move, bishop h6 check. If that's captured, then queen f7 is mate. So the king steps up, and now possibly this is the move that Adams missed, bishop e3. So the queen takes on c4. And now queen h7, and there's simply no defense to all the threats. White just wants to play queen f7 mate, and, well, let's say bishop takes e6, you give a check, king f7, queen f8 mate, and if rook g7 you can play bishop h6, threatening this one, threatening that one. White has a winning position, so great shame Michael Adams missed that, and the game eventually ended in a draw. Let's take a look at another game, Tomaszewski against Ding Liren. This was such a tense encounter. We joined the game after 49 moves, and still, major pieces on the board. White is a pawn up, but this pawn on b2 doesn't count for a great deal. Perhaps the most salient feature of the position is the relative safety of the two kings. These pawns have advanced, and that means the king is not quite as secure as it might be, whereas black's king behind these pawns and with the bishop tucked in, completely safe. Nevertheless, with the queen and knight here, it's hard to imagine that white is going to be somehow in huge trouble. Rook e2 is a safe move, holding on to the pawn. Nevertheless, I think, if anyone stands better here, it's going to be black. Black certainly has, well, practical chances at the very least. He can try and infiltrate with queen and rook, and maybe even break these pawns up to take a pawn. Should be a draw though, but instead Tomaszewski played knight d4, and I think as in the Carlsen Ho Ifan game, I think when you've been playing a long time, there's a temptation. You want to sort of cut towards a draw quickly. You want to try and simplify. And knight d4 is a forcing move, obviously attacking queen and rook. This was met by queen b4. Clearly Ding had calculated this move. And if white now takes that rook on b3, this is fascinating. Black takes the rook, and at first I looked at this and thought, well, what's going on? This looks like white is simplifying. This must be a draw, but incredibly, black can get a Zugzwang position here. Take a look at this. Check, and then another check. So white has to come back, and now queen d3. Now, this is a fantastic example of the power of a centralized queen. So it's looking in this direction, it's also looking in this direction, and that knight is stranded. Well, it comes back to c1, but after queen c2, this position is Zugzwang. Incredible. White does not have a decent move in this position. For example, well, what happens if we move the knight? Let's play knight a2. So we give a check, white has to block, and then queen b1, and you pick up the loose knight. Okay, let's go back. And what about a queen move? Let's say queen f1. We give a check here. Now that's important. The queen still looks to the knight, so if queen g2, then you can come back to take the knight. And if king g1, then bishop c5, and the king gets cut to shreds. What did I tell you? That f pawn should be back on f2, but I'm afraid those diagonals are just too weak. So, I mean, there are alternatives, but basically white has run out of moves here. So, back to the game. So, white can't take the rook on b3. So, Tomaszewski played queen e4. I should add that by this point, Tomaszewski was running short of time just to make things more difficult for himself. So now black took on b2, and now I think it's evident that white is in serious trouble with black conquering the second rank, and at some moment that bishop might come out to d6 just to start attacking h2. Very difficult for white now. The knight should come back to f3, that's really where it belongs, but black has decent practical chances there. Instead, Tomaszewski played the pawn to f6. Then queen d6 hits h2 and hits the pawn on f6, and another blunder, queen e5, And rook b1, one material straight away. If queen d6, then you take with check and then recapture on d6. And otherwise, king g2, you exchange and take on d4. So, a great win for Ding Liren, and that brings him up to 6.5 out of 11. Caruana on 7 out of 11. Carlsen a point clear on 8 out of 11 with just 2 rounds to go.